Welcome back, everybody. Mike here out in the garage, and today we're going to get back into working on my wife's 1987 Honda CMX250 Rebel, otherwise known as Barney. Now, it's been a couple years since we did any content on Barney for various reasons. You know, we had that virus of unspecified origin, all the lockdowns that came with that. We also had the issue with our garage. The old garage was falling down, had to get a new one built. So Barney had to be put on a trailer, all the parts boxed up, go into storage, sit in storage for a year plus, and all the parts come back and Barney come back. Then on top of all that nonsense, I started a new job, which has consumed almost all of my time for the past 2 years. Finally, I am getting to a point where I can work on this thing again and not lose my mind. Now, I've done some stuff since I made my last video with Melly, and this is going to have to be yet another catch-up video on what we did. We have actually done some stuff, didn't capture on camera, but I'm also going to go over some of the stuff that we've done to the bike that was in the last video that I didn't really talk about. Kind of look at the details. You notice I've got some things mocked up on the bike. We're starting to roll along, starting to get some stuff done. I overcame a major hurdle here with some of the design choices, and it's starting to turn pretty good. Let's get stuck in. So this is kind of how Barney's sitting right now. There's a few things, and of course we're going to go over those in this video, that we've done since the last installment. As Barney sits now, I have fenders mocked up. Now, keep in mind, these are not their final shape, dimension, position. These fenders are custom rolled fenders, center rib, like old BSA style or chopper style fenders from TC Brothers. Front one fits pretty good. It was the smallest pinch roller die they had. The front fender fits pretty good as far as radius. It'll fit better when I chop it down to its size. Digging through the parts that we had for Barney, I never noticed that there was a vinyl pouch tucked under the seat, but it was all of the paperwork from when Barney was brand new in 1987. 87 owner's manual. So some interesting things we found out. The first thing we found out is Barney's a veteran, just like me. I was in the U.S. Army. Barney was at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, and there used to be a military post sticker right there that was all beat up. Melly and I always assumed this was from the local joint tactical base Selfridge here in Michigan, but it wasn't. And I've got the original insurance card. I've got the original owner's identification number from Honda that was filled out to the original owner. I'm not going to say his name, but he bought it on June 9th of 1987. I think I want to frame this one. This one's really cool. I've got the original warranty sheet for Honda that Barney came with, along with the dealer distribution network and the regions. I wonder if any of these phone numbers on here still work. Barney's bona fides, as they say, you know? That's pretty cool. The original bill of sale from when Barney was sold, $1,550 is what the guy who purchased Barney back in 1987 paid for it, and he bought it from D. Hittinger Motorcycles on 619 North Main, Lansing, Kansas. I don't even know if this place is still in business. I haven't looked. But that was where Barney was originally purchased from. And I've even got the original insurance policy paperwork where the guy had transferred the insurance from his 74 Honda CB500T. But let's see, he paid a whole $69.15 for the entire year for full coverage insurance for this bike back in 1987. But yeah, I've got all the original paperwork, but I'm definitely gonna frame, this is just 8.5 by 11. I'm going to frame the original warranty, and I think maybe the owner identification card here from Honda. I think this would have been on the sales tag, like, you know, a lot tag with your keys and stuff, because this is a tear off, so they just teared it off. And it's got the VIN number, the engine number, the model, CMX250 CH. Didn't know what the CH stood for. Maybe that has something to do with the fact that the frame's all the purple color. I still don't remember exactly what Honda calls that. That's cool. You will not believe the grief and agony I went through trying to design the mounts for this fuel tank that would set it at the angle that I wanted, which is, if you look at the bottom of the fuel tank, it forms this kind of a balance line with this portion of the frame. But the frame actually has two different angles to it. So when you put the fuel tank on, you can't just match the angle of the backbone because it's a different angle to what's under the seat. So there's a lot of crap going on geometry-wise. The tank can't be too far forward or the handlebars will clang into the side of the tank, even at the end of the stops for the, the steering lock stops. And then I've got the Springer seat here that I can't use the mount that came with it because it's a blue collar bobber Springer seat. So I had to make a mount from scratch that holds the back of the fuel tank and securely mounts the front of the Springer seat, and also the brackets at the right angle so that it looks like it's supposed to be that way the whole time. Oh my God. Let's get the fuel tank off of Barney here, and you can see what I'm talking about. So one of the considerations that I found out quickly, because I'm not a custom bike builder, I mean, I don't do this professionally, I just do this for fun, and sometimes Melly comes out and hangs out with me and we work on the bike and have a good time, and that's really what it's all about. I didn't want to modify the bike too much to where it's hard to maintain and it's not using factory parts, because factory parts are, in many cases, probably superior to some of the garbage you do aftermarket. So this goes back, and you just lift the front end up. There you go. So if you need to pull the fuel tank off, you can just, service the bike. We'll go over this tank in a minute, but you can see how much space there is in the bottom of the fuel tank and just how big the backbone on a Honda Rebel is. You can't just put a Sportster style tank on this. I mean, you can, but then it's Frisco style. It sits really high in the frame and it points in the air. It looks kind of goofy unless you're going for some kind of chopper look. I'll never find that bolt again. So now that I got the Springer seat unbolted, I'm just going to lift him up out of the way. This is the bracket I made. Now this bracket is nothing more than a bunch of flat steel. Through hole, I drilled and tapped this one. There's two more holes underneath that are drilled and tapped. Yeah, you can kind of see that here. So that holds that. You could probably pick the bike up with this, honestly. Two pieces of steel that I welded on the sides. So it's plated a half lap, and I filled the seam with weld. I'm not sure if you can make it out, but you can kind of see how the steel is discolored. So I got the full penetration in there, and then I beat the hell out of it with a hammer before I did some metal finishing. This needs to be finish sanded. I got a little porosity here. It's because the weld was so thick. This was just a spacer that I welded onto the end. This was from the old garage. This was a really thick piece of steel. That was a pair of angle brackets that held a shelf up in the old garage. Instead of throwing it away, I just cut it to what I needed, ground off all the galvanizing. Boom, combination fuel tank mount and Springer seat mount. These are the original threaded bosses on the Rebel frame. This is how the factory tank mounts. This rubber bit here, I actually used a die that cuts the holes out in the end of your grips to try and fit a CB style rubber isolator mount on there, because originally I was going to use the CB style mount and it never worked out. So I ended up modifying the fuel tank and not the bike, because it was the path of least resistance, least amount of crap to solve. I mean, you can see on a Rebel just how wide. I mean, look at my hand here, right? This thing's like, I don't know, not quite the size of a beer can, maybe a little smaller in diameter, but it's way thicker than typical frame tubing, right? And you get this big plate of steel here, because I think this tubing here is like a 1-inch tube, or roughly 1-inch tubing on the rest of the bike's frame. You can see this is all open. The air box, battery box, all that crap is gone. I've got a dummy oil tank that goes here. I gotta make a mount for, and then all of this stuff is gonna tuck inside of that. I'm gonna make an organizer for it. And I'm also gonna use an anti-gravity lithium battery, which will be way more cranking capacity than this thing had in the lead acid, and it'll all fit inside. I forgot to mention it earlier, but I made this bracket to hold the speedo housing and the tachometer housing, and it just mounts to the existing threaded holes in the upper clamp, the upper yoke or upper triple clamp, that the box, the plastic box that held all the wiring in from the original bike. So, you know, if you can reuse the holes that the factory gave you, why not? There's gonna be stuff that I have to cut off the frame. I need to detab it. I'm probably gonna get rid of the helmet lock. I haven't decided on that yet. All this is gonna get cleaned up. It's gonna be very clean. Just open, just the motor, the air cleaner element, a dummy oil tank, and then that's it. Then you'll have that clear space under the Springer, and you know, it'll look classic. Let's talk about the fuel tank. I kind of just eyeballed this on eBay. I was looking at a bunch of fuel tanks trying to find something that was already Honda. Thinking maybe I could find a Honda Shadow tank that would fit the Rebel. I saw this one, and it was from a wrecked bike, so the bike was, it wasn't anything somebody was restoring, they were parting it out. And I noticed that this particular year CB has this kind of, this indented area, which is almost kind of like what you'd see on a cafe racer, right? And then you've got this really sweet looking fuel cap. So you press down the thumb button while you're pushing it, and then it just flips open. The tank's actually not bad on the inside. I am gonna coat it in Caswell, I think. I'm gonna get in there with a light and look around, mainly down in the bottom corners. There's not a lot of rust in here. I got a brand new old stock gas cap, the new seal. It looks really trick. It looks like a race, you know, part. The tank's pretty straight. There's not a lot of dings in it. There's a couple little ones, but nothing that can't be body worked out. Now, I've also got the original emblems. They're just off in a safe place. How I got this to fit onto the Rebel, this is the secret right here. So originally there's this C-shaped stamped steel cup, and that slots into that kind of rubber donut on the frame on the CBs. And so the front mounting is kind of hidden on the CBs, where the Rebel uses these kind of dog ear tabs. So what I did is I just used just some weld steel. Our local hardware store has a project center, and it's just called weld steel. And there's like bar stock, flat stock, tube stock. It's just mild steel. You can get some, you know, like 90-degree angle iron, that kind of stuff. So this is just flat bar stock. And I just cut the tabs to look like the ones that were on the Rebel. I welded them, probably not the prettiest welds, because I was getting used to my new welder. Cut the cups off the inside and just welded these plates. I did the same thing at the back, and it's just a piece of weld steel. This has a slight bend on it right there. And these grommets, front and rear, they're the same ones from the Honda Rebel. Mounts to the original mounting spots with the exception of the rear combined bracket. But the front bolt hole in that bracket actually is the same as the rear tank mount from the original bike. So this all just bolts on. I mean, obviously I had to weld these brackets on, right? I didn't have to worry about blowing through the fuel tank because in this area and also down here, there's another plate of steel that another part that would make this fit its original bike was on there. So I just cut those off and welded this to that. So there wasn't really any risk of like burning through if I didn't have the welder set up perfectly, because when I did this, geez, like almost right before the garage came down, I was not up to speed on the new welder. Last reason that we used this tank versus like any other combination other than the fact that I think it looks cool. This is exactly the same petcock or fuel valve that a Rebel takes. Same style, same thread, same fitting, same everything. You can take your factory Honda Rebel fuel tap, put it on this, screw it down, and it works perfectly because it's exactly the same. So that worked out great. And it's also in exactly the right spot too. Let me go grab Barney's original fuel tank and I'll show you. This is a little different. It had a different style grommet. So I ended up using this type of mounting system that they did on the front for Barney, these tabs. That's what I reproduced on the CB tank. Here you go. See, there's the threaded mount for the fuel tap. This is a much smaller tank in every dimension, you know, and it's very narrow here. You know, I'm gonna hold on to it. Of course, it's Barney's history. Theoretically, I could put this back on Barney because I'm not messing up the frame. Honestly, after I go through all the work and I make that whole bike repainted in, you know, this nice dark mulberry, wineberry, whatever Honda calls that, it's gonna look awesome. It's gonna be a really cool project, but yeah. Probably just hang this dude on the wall, clean it up, and you know, it'll be a nice conversation piece. Pet peeve of mine when guys build custom bikes, you know, I could space the fender out more, but I see a lot of fenders where it's slammed down on a tire and you can clearly see the fender doesn't match the radius of the wheel and tire. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a set of shrinker stretcher dies that you clamp into a bench vise, which I also need to buy. You know, garage goals. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come through with a shrinker stretcher die and I'm gonna shrink this edge. And if I draw that metal in, I can reduce the radius and I can make it fit the wheel. Now, it's also sitting on a piece of wood because it's way more fender than I need. So I gotta figure out where that's gonna get cut and how it's gonna look. Where it ends is gonna be right here. This height isn't quite right. It'll actually sit down a little bit, but again, it's not at the right radius currently. When it is, I think that'll look just right. I'm gonna do a fender strut here that will match the angle of that part of the frame. I think that'll look good, it'll look balanced. Right now the bike's sitting down on its own weight, and I mean, obviously I'm not sitting on it, but I got my scissor jack down so that the bike is compressing the rear suspension. This shock's actually taller than a stock Rebel shock because I wanted to raise it up just a little bit because it's all about angles and proportions and dimensions and all that good stuff. The last thing we were considering is I bought this headlight cowl or fairing for Melly Speedmaster. It's actually for Triumph Thruxton, but in the bin of parts I was digging through, now this is just sitting on here and its final shape and its height and all that crap hasn't been done yet. It's just literally laying on the bike, so it probably doesn't look as good as it could. But in the next video, I'll be cutting the fenders to size, kind of positioning them on the bike. I guess Barney doesn't like the headlight cowl because he just threw it off of there. You know, it also looks pretty cool without it, but, you know, this painted up, it could look pretty sweet. Or maybe I go with just a fly screen, kind of like what I have on my Scout. That's another option too. I do like the idea of having like the little windshield or fairing here. I don't know. Gotta drop this headlight down first and then I'll figure it out. So if you like this video, please go down below, hit the like button, subscribe, notifications, all that crap so that YouTube pushes us up in the algorithm. We're gonna try and get out here on a regular basis and work on the bike and actually put out some content this year. I wanna get this thing done. It ran and rode just fine before we started turning it into a project, which is probably the best thing to do. The hardest thing you could do is take a bike that doesn't run and turn it into a project bike, whether you want to make a tracker, bobber, chopper, cafe racer, doesn't matter. Get a bike that runs. You'll save more money with a running bike than you will taking a bike that doesn't run, spending all the money to get it running and then modifying it. Thanks for coming and hanging out in the garage with me again. I'm hoping to get out here, maybe Melly shows up from time to time, to get Barney done. That's my goal for the year. I don't know if I'll do it. There's a lot to do, but I'm gonna take my best shot at it and see how far I can get. Anyhow, thanks, I appreciate it. Everybody ride safe.